All right. So are you ready to like really dive deep into this world? I mean, it's both familiar and like completely unsettling at the same time.
Yeah.
We're talking about George Orwell's 1984 today.
Right.
Based on those excerpts that you sent our way. And we're going to unpack why this book still feels so relevant, even in 2024.
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things about 1984 that's so fascinating is that even though it was written decades ago, it just captures these like really fundamental anxieties about power, surveillance, truth, like how malleable truth can be.
Yeah.
And I think those anxieties are even more potent today than they were when the book was first published. So definitely relevant.
Okay, so let's imagine that we're stepping right into the shoes of Winston Smith.
Okay.
Our main guy in the story.
Right.
He lives in this like super cramped apartment.
Yeah.
And there's this telescreen. It's always on and always watching him. He can like dim it, but he can never fully turn it off.
Yeah.
It's a constant reminder that Big Brother's always watching.
Always there.
It really makes you think about all those smart devices that we've got,
Oh, absolutely.
Like, are we really ever truly alone?
Right, exactly. That feeling of being constantly watched is so key to how the party is able to maintain control.
Right.
It creates this atmosphere of just like pervasive fear, and you start to self-censor. You second guess everything that you think, everything that you say, even like the way you act.
Yeah.
You're just wondering, like, is someone watching me? Are they going to judge me for this?
It's like that feeling when you think you've muted yourself on a work call.
Oh, yeah.
But you haven't.
Oh, totally. The worst.
Oh, my gosh. The worst.
Yeah.
And on top of this constant scrutiny, Winston lives in a world of just total scarcity.
Right.
The food is bland. The cigarettes are terrible. And he drinks this stuff called Victory Gin.
Yeah. I don't think I'd want to try that.
It sounds awful. Like, have you ever been so stressed that you just eat whatever's like the easiest and quickest thing you can find?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, even if it's not good for you.
All the time.
I feel like Winston can definitely relate to that.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, and that's part of the party's strategy, right? To deliberately keep people kind of on edge, deprived of things.
Yeah.
It keeps them focused on basic survival.
Right.
And makes it a lot harder to even think about rebellion.
Right.
Or even just like personal fulfillment, just like basic enjoyment.
But Winston, he finds this glimmer of defiance.
Okay.
In this really unexpected place. A diary.
A diary.
Yeah. And he starts to like secretly write down his thoughts, his feelings, all his doubts about the party.
That's dangerous.
It's super dangerous, right?
Yeah.
It's like a straight up act of rebellion in this world where they even police your thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. But that diary really represents Winston's attempt to hold on to some piece of himself.
Yeah.
His individuality. It's a space where he can, think for himself and express himself, something that the party is constantly trying to control and suppress.
Yeah.
That very human need to express yourself.
And speaking of control, Winston's job is where things start to get really creepy, honestly.
Right.
He works at this place called the Ministry of Truth. And get this, his job is literally to rewrite history, to match whatever narrative the party is pushing at the moment. Talk about fake news.
That's wild.
It really makes you wonder how much of what we see and hear is even actually true.
It's true, yeah. It's really unsettling to think about, right? And I think what Winston's job shows us is just how dangerous propaganda and misinformation can be, because the party has absolute control over information, and they use it to completely manipulate the way people think, the way they believe, the way they see the world, to hold on to their power.
It's scary how truth can be twisted, especially when you've got that kind of control over the narrative.
Yeah.
And the party doesn't just like control information, they also control emotions.
Oh, right.
And this is where we get to this thing called the 2 minutes hate.
Okay.
It's this daily ritual where everyone's forced to just like unleash their rage against the party's designated enemies.
Right, right.
Can you imagine being swept up in that kind of mob mentality?
I mean, it's hard to even fathom, but it's so powerful.
Yeah.
It's like a masterclass in how to manipulate people psychologically.
Right.
The party uses this ritual to channel all of the people's frustrations and anger and anxiety onto these scapegoats, taking the attention away from the party's own failings. And it's a tactic that, sadly is still being used today. Pretty effectively, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's like when you see politicians trying to create these us versus them situations to distract from real issues.
Exactly.
And then on top of all of that, there's the ever-present threat of the thought police.
Right.
Just the idea of them being able to monitor your thoughts is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, it is.
It makes you question, what does freedom even mean in a world like that?
Yeah. It's the ultimate invasion of privacy, right? That's what Orwell is trying to show us, how technology can be used to really oppress people. It makes you think about all the ways that we're being tracked in our own lives.
Yeah.
Even in supposedly free societies.
Okay, get ready, because this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
And kind of mind-blowing. There's this concept in 1984 called doublethink.
Okay.
It's the ability to hold two completely contradictory beliefs at the same time and believe both of them to be true.
Right.
Like war is peace or freedom is slavery. How is that even possible?
It's so bizarre, right? It's
crazy.
But it's totally essential to how the party maintains control.
It allows them to just constantly shift the narrative, rewrite history, justify literally anything that they do, no matter how contradictory or illogical it might seem.
Yeah.
And it works because it's a form of self-deception that allows people to be complicit in a system that is fundamentally oppressive.
So you have this oppressive regime controlling information, emotions, even thoughts. It feels utterly hopeless, right?
Right.
Well, Orwell introduces us to the proles.
Right.
They're the working class, the vast majority of the population. And the party kind of just ignores them.
You do, yeah.
They see them as too simple to pose a threat.
Right.
But I think the party really underestimates the proles.
I agree.
They might not be actively involved in politics or intellectual stuff,
right,
but they haven't been totally indoctrinated by the party's ideology.
Exactly.
There's this scene that I found both fascinating and kind of funny.
Okay.
Orwell describes these prole women fighting over saucepans.
Like, it seems kind of trivial on the surface, right?
Yeah.
But it shows that they still have this capacity for, raw emotion, for collective action. Something the party members seem to have lost. It makes my Black Friday shopping trips look tame.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they haven't lost touch with those basic human instincts, those emotions, love, hate, anger, joy, and that makes them dangerous.
Yeah.
Because the party's control is based on suppressing all of that.
Yeah.
So they're a potential threat.
Winston, he's so desperate to connect to the past. He wants to know what life was like before the party.
Right.
So he finds this old prole in a pub, and he's hoping to learn something.
Okay.
But the old man, he's full of stories, but he can't give any, clear answers. It's like the party's just wiped out history.
Yeah.
Made it impossible to know the truth.
Yeah. It highlights how the party manipulates the past to maintain its control over the present. Without a clear understanding of what really happened, it's almost impossible to question the party's version of reality.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder of just how important it is to protect historical records and to fight against attempts to rewrite the past.
And in this world where everything you do is monitored and you're constantly being repressed, love and intimacy become acts of rebellion.
Right.
This is where we meet Julia, Winston's lover. Their affair is forbidden, of course.
Yeah.
But it becomes like a direct challenge to parties' control over people's personal lives.
Right.
She's got this rebellious spirit, but she's also really pragmatic.
Right.
About how to navigate all of the party's crazy rules.
Yeah, she's smart.
Yeah, she's really smart.
Yeah, she's a different kind of rebel than Winston is. Winston's driven by these big ideas, philosophy, truth. But Julia, she's more focused on just her own personal freedom and happiness and finding those little moments of joy and pleasure in a world that's designed to crush them.
Yeah.
And their relationship, even though it started as this act of rebellion, becomes this source of strength for both of them, this reminder that there's still beauty and connection to be found.
And the party, they're all about control and suppression, especially when it comes to sex. They want to just get rid of pleasure and make sex purely functional, just for procreation.
Right.
Like, no fun allowed.
No.
It's a really bleak view of something that's so fundamental to the human experience,
It's dehumanizing.
It really is.
It's another way for them to maintain power, right? If they can control your most basic instincts and desires, then it's easier to control your thoughts and your actions. And Julian and Winston's affair is a direct rejection of that control.
Yeah.
They're claiming their right to be happy, to experience intimacy on their own terms. And the room above Mr. Charrington's shop, that becomes their sanctuary, this temporary escape from all that surveillance. It's a little bubble of freedom where they can just be themselves, be vulnerable with each other, and experience that connection. That's just completely denied to them in the outside world.
Yeah. It's a precious thing.
It is. It is.
But unfortunately for Winston and Julia, that bubble is about to burst.
Yeah, and that's where we'll have to leave it for now. We've seen Winston's fight against the party's power, his desperate search for truth, and his love for Julia. But things are about to take a very dark turn.
Yeah.
Make sure you come back for part 2, where we'll explore the devastating consequences of Winston and Julia's rebellion.
Oh, it's going to be a rough one.
So we left off with Winston and Julia finding that little bit of refuge, remember, in that room above Mr. Charrington's shop. Yeah. It seemed like they had this place where they could kind of get away from the party's control. But as we know, in 1984, nothing is quite what it seems.
Yeah, I'd say that's an understatement.
Yeah.
I mean, remember that feeling of hope? That maybe they could carve out a little space for themselves? Well, Orwell just rips that away from us.
He does.
In the most brutal way.
Yeah.
It turns out that their little love nest is actually a trap. Mr. Charrington, that sweet old shopkeeper,
I know,
is a member of the thought police.
It's devastating.
I felt so betrayed reading that.
Yeah.
Like finding out that your favorite teacher was a spy or something.
Right, exactly. You just completely lose trust in everything.
Yeah, you don't know who to believe.
And it just proves that there's no escape from the party. No matter where you go, Big Brother is watching.
And from there, things just go downhill so fast.
They do.
Winston and Julia are separated, captured, thrown into the Ministry of Love.
The Ministry of Love.
Which, I mean, the name sounds nice.
All right, it sounds very nice.
But the Ministry of Love is anything but.
It's the opposite of love.
Yeah, it's where they carry out the most brutal and dehumanizing acts of control.
It's a perfect example of doublethink in action, isn't it?
Yeah.
Love twisted into hate. Freedom becomes submission. It's just a really chilling reminder of what totalitarian regimes will do to control their people.
And in the Ministry of Love, we meet O'Brien, Winston's torturer.
Right.
But he's not just some mindless sadist.
No.
He's intelligent, he's articulate, and he totally believes in what the party is doing, which is what makes him so scary.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Have you ever met someone who is just so convinced of their own beliefs, even when those beliefs seemed harmful or wrong? It's almost impossible to reason with them.
Yeah, it's like they're living in a different reality.
They are.
And O'Brien, he's a true believer in the party's vision, which makes him a much more compelling and dangerous villain than just a regular, evil bad guy.
He represents fanaticism, right? Blind faith in an ideology, no matter the cost.
And the torture that Winston goes through is both physical and psychological. He's beaten, starved, subjected to electroshock therapy. But the real goal is to break him mentally.
Right.
To force him to give up his own perception of reality and accept the party's version of the truth.
That psychological manipulation, that's really at the heart of the party's power. They understand that to truly control someone, you have to control their mind, their beliefs, how they see the world. And Winston's torture is a horrifying example of how fear and pain and relentless indoctrination can be used to literally reshape a person's identity.
And the worst betrayal of all comes when Winston is forced to betray Julia, the one person he truly loved and trusted. It just shows how far the party is willing to go to crush any sense of individual loyalty or love. It's just heartbreaking.
It is. It's like the final blow to Winston's spirit. It shows that the party has this absolute power. They can control not just your actions, but your emotions, too. They can destroy the bonds between people and make you completely dependent on the state for your sense of belonging, for everything, really.
In the end, Winston is completely broken, utterly subservient to the party. He gives up his own thoughts, his own memories, his own identity. He embraces the party's logic, even though it's twisted as the only truth. He even comes to believe that 2 + 2 = 5.
It's a complete victory for the party and a devastating defeat for the human spirit.
It's a bleak ending, isn't it?
It is. But Orwell does offer us a glimmer of hope. Remember the proles.
Even though they're mostly ignored by the party, they still seem to have that spark of humanity. They haven't lost their capacity for love, anger, joy.
Yeah.
The party members have forgotten what it means to be human, but the proles haven't.
So what happens to Winston?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, and that's what we'll be diving into in part 3 of our deep dive into 1984. We'll be exploring INGSOC, the party's ideology, and Newspeak, their engineered language, which is designed to control thought itself. So join us as we unpack the final chapters of this dystopian masterpiece and think about its relevance to our own world.
All right, so we're back and we're diving into the last part of 1984.
Okay.
And, we've seen the horrors of Oceania.
Right.
The party's insane grip on power and poor Winston's transformation.
Yeah.
But now I want to shift gears a little bit.
And talk about something that I find both fascinating and terrifying at the same time. INGSOC and Newspeak. It's like Orwell took all the worst parts of political jargon.
Yeah.
And cranked it up to like 1,000.
Exactly.
INGSOC, it stands for English Socialism. It's like the foundation of the party's entire ideology.
Right. It governs every single aspect of life in Oceania.
Yeah.
From politics and economics to relationships, even their language. It's built on this idea that the party is always right and that anyone who disagrees is a threat.
So it's like they created this system where the party controls everything and thinking differently is literally impossible.
Yeah, and that's where Newspeak comes in. It's a language designed to limit thought by shrinking the vocabulary and simplifying the grammar. So the idea is if you can't express a thought, you can't even have it.
Okay, I'm still trying to wrap my head around this Newspeak thing. It sounds so weird.
It is. It's super bizarre.
Can you break it down for me? Like, how do they change language?
Well, they use a lot of abbreviations, compound words, and euphemisms. So, for example, the Ministry of Truth, where Winston works, it's called Minute True in Newspeak.
Okay.
And the Thought Police, they're called Think Pol. So you're shortening words.
Right.
Taking away the nuance and simplifying everything.
So it's like they're removing any possibility of interpretation or critical thinking. Everything's just black and white, good or bad, party approved or thought crime.
Right, and that concept of thought crime is key to how Newspeak works. Any thought that goes against the party is a crime. You can be imprisoned, tortured, even killed.
It's insane.
It's really a form of mind control.
It makes you think about how language is used in our world to manipulate people, to control what they think about certain issues.
Right.
Like politicians using euphemisms to downplay the horrors of war. Or advertisers with those catchy slogans to get us to buy stuff we don't need.
Exactly. Orwell was really ahead of his time. He saw how language could be used not just to communicate ideas, but to shape them, to distort them, and to control how we understand the world.
Newspeak is just like this ultimate example of how language can be weaponized to control our minds, to limit our freedom, and ultimately to maintain power.
It really makes you appreciate the power of language and how important it is to protect freedom of speech. We have to be vigilant, question everything, and make sure we're not being manipulated by the language that's being used around us.
So we've explored this like really messed up reality of Oceania, the party's crazy methods of control, and what happened to Winston. What does all this mean for us today in 2024?
Well, we might not have newspeak or the thought police, not yet anyway.
Right.
But we do live in a world where information is manipulated.
Yeah.
And the truth is constantly being challenged. So 1984 is this warning to be critical, to question everything, and to be wary of those who are trying to control us. It reminds us that the fight for freedom and truth is never really over.
Yeah, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by all the information overload, the feeling that we're always being watched. But 1984 also reminds us that even when it seems like everything is hopeless, the human spirit can resist. We have the power to think critically, to question authority, to speak truth to power. Orwell's message is just as relevant now as it was then. We can't let our guard down. We have to stay engaged.
And be willing to challenge those in control. That's the only way to make sure that the world of 1984 stays a fictional warning and not our future.
And on that note, we're wrapping up our deep dive into 1984. It's a dark book, but it's an important one, and it's something that we all should think about.
Definitely.
Especially in today's world. So thanks for coming along with us on this journey. Keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep fighting for a better future.
Absolutely.